Okay, so thanks again for everybody for joining us. Today we have the pleasure of having Shiloh from the American Indian Health and Family Services Project. And she is the program manager for the food sovereignty programs. She, like all of you, is a sub-awardee for another GHWIC grantee and has done a lot of incredible work in an urban setting working on health and wellness in Indian country. And so she has been so gracious to offer her story and share about her project and successes. And so I'll go ahead and turn it over to her to take us through.
Thank you, Geneva. So I'm going to start off by, can everyone hear me okay? Good. I tend to speak pretty softly sometimes, so let me know if I start trailing off there. But I'm going to start off by sharing a digital story that I made, I think, a little over a year ago, and it just kind of will introduce a little bit of myself to you and how I came into the work that I'm doing, and then I'll talk some about our project and how we got started through GHWIC. So let me get this going here. Oops, here we go. It's not wanting to cooperate here. And can you all see this? Okay. I am the first generation on my mother's side in over 100 years to be raised by their parents. I grew up in a community where I was a token minority, where everyone knew me as the native kid, but no one could tell me what that meant. Schools failed to include Native people in their history lessons, and I was publicly shamed in school for not knowing my own history. They wanted me to share what it meant to be Native, but I didn't even know what it meant for me to be Native. As a young adult, I sought out the clues and pieces of this identity anywhere I could find it. My spirit was so hungry to know where it belonged, to know what it meant to be Indigenous to a particular place. I searched for our narratives in the voice of Native authors and found pieces of myself in their words. I learned our plants and recipes, and they tasted like home. I asked the questions that our community had been taught not to speak of. And in there, I filled the gaps of family history. And I found a story all too common in Native families and communities. Removed again and again from our ancestral homelands, we were stripped of our stories, medicines, ceremonies, and pieces of identity embedded in those places. Removing us from those lands meant displacing not only our bodies, but our spirits as well. And the eras of forced relocation and boarding schools left a clear legacy in our disjointed, scattered family. Through those hard-earned truths, I was getting a sense of who I am and where I came from. Working in the community garden now is where I'm learning to braid all of these pieces of my identity together, remembering what it means to be a person of a particular place. As a new full moon rises, it signals a time to begin harvesting the foods coming into season. That when the ice begins to melt, maple syrup is running. That heartberries are the first fruit to flower. Which parts of the raspberry are women's medicine? And saving our heirloom seeds because they hold the collective stories of generations. Growing and eating these foods reconnects me to the rhythms of the natural world and the unique qualities of this particular place and time. Each day I'm cultivating a deeper, more intimate relationship to the place I inhabit, becoming more aware of our interdependent relationship. If we take care of the land, it will take care of us in return. We as Indigenous people have a special role and responsibility to preserve this place, our plants, medicines, and foods for future generations. It is there, hands in the dirt and sunlight on my face, that I know I am where I belong. taking care of my community, the land, and our foods, nourishing our bodies and our spirits.
So I'm just gonna switch over here to my presentation. Oops. Can you all see that okay? Hope so. Let me know if there are any problems.
You're on presenter mode on this side.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you. For some reason, let's see. Let me just practice this and
It's okay. People are saying that was really beautiful in the chat about your video.
thank you. Digital storytelling is such a powerful tool to tell stories. There's so much healing, and let's see, I don't know why it's is that
Let's see. Yeah, there it is.
okay, great.
Perfect.
Yeah, digital storytelling is a really powerful tool. It's a really therapeutic process for people telling their story, but there's so much strength that's shared among people when those stories are shared with others. And it's a really great qualitative evaluation tool too that the Great Lakes grantees have been utilizing the last few years. And that's a nice way to kind of introduce myself to you. But again, my name is Shiloh Maples, and I'm the program manager for Food Sovereignty and Wellness Initiatives. That's a mouthful. Work at American Indian Health and Family Services in Detroit, and we're located in Southwest Detroit. And our program that we've created over the last few years is called Sacred Roots, and it's a food sovereignty initiative to support healthy and traditional living in our urban landscape of Detroit. And because it looks really different when you're doing food sovereignty or food access work, the urban context is completely different. And so we've been spending the last few years trying to figure out what that means for urban Native communities. But like I said, our agency, American Indian Health, we're a medical clinic and a behavioral health clinic, and we have a variety of different community programs, including Sacred Roots. We're in Southwest Detroit, which is right on the border with Dearborn. And we are a sub-awardee of GHWIC through the Great Lakes Intertribal Epidemiology Center. And over the next little bit together, I'm just going to share our community story of what we've been doing the last 4.5 years. And so with that said, I'll go ahead and get started here. Did it advance okay? Okay, great. So why ancestral foods, why food sovereignty, and why sacred roots? And I'm not going to give you a long history lesson. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with it, but we know that over the last 500 years, there have been external powers and entities that have stripped Native people of their sovereignty and ability to sustain healthy traditional lives. You know, we've really been disenfranchised from the policy making process that really has determined where people could live, how they could live, and it's really created this kind of ecological model around our system around Native communities that doesn't reflect our worldview and our traditions. And so, you know, in a lot of ways, it's been very detrimental and traumatic for people. And so we had to start thinking, like, how are we going to repair those traditional social systems, health systems in our urban, very diverse urban community? And, you know, that was a question I was kind of asking myself a bit before we were actually awarded this grant, you know, because we know that that history has stripped our communities of like our decision-making autonomy, our knowledge and skills, and the social systems that really allowed us to live healthy lives. And that in turn has led to these health statistics, these things that we know, you know, and you know, in Detroit, some of these rates are even higher than the national averages for Indigenous communities. But, you know, that's part of the context of why this work is important. But in spring of 2015, we, as a subawardee, got the Good Health and Wellness in Indian Country grant. We know you are all familiar with the scope of the grant, so I won't go into that. But the first thing that we did was do a community needs assessment, a health assessment, which was pretty comprehensive. We used a tool that was developed by someone at the Great Lakes Epicenter. It's called Mosaic. And what it really showed was a lot of different things, but things that, when that data was kind of compiled, we saw that there was very low food security or access to healthy food in our community, which we kind of already knew based on the food access, food justice work happening in Detroit. But we saw major rates of chronic illness similar to other Indigenous communities. But there was a real, the community was really prioritizing access to traditional foods. They thought that it was a priority. On the survey, they stated that it was a priority for our agency to focus some work on that. And so after GLTEC compiled all of that data, they sent it back to us, and I had a town hall meeting where I presented it back to community members, and there were probably about 40 to 50 community members at that first meeting. And I facilitated a conversation afterwards of, based on that data, what are the things that are most important to you as a community, and how would you like to address that? And the things that they said were, their priorities were traditional food access, the ethics of how their food was produced and who was producing it, and that traditional knowledge and culture and values remained being a part of how the food was grown and processed, and they wanted support in both growing, processing, preserving foods in their own homes. And so that kind of set a basic framework of, for our staff team of what things we would focus on. And so we invited folks at that meeting to join us in a steering committee and come up with some possible strategies incorporating those priorities. And so we came up with like 6 to 8 ideas and made this poster that we took to our winter solstice later that year and allowed community members, there are typically about 300 community members that attend this event every year, and we allowed the community to vote on which strategies they would most like to see. And from that, the things that they chose were a food sovereignty alliance, expansion of community gardening efforts, and trying to establish some type of community kitchen that everyone could use to process their food and also to learn about traditional foods. And within that first amount of time, we're like, well, we don't want to call it by its grant name. What are we going to call it? And so that steering committee came up with the idea of Sacred Roots. And I had a friend that made that beautiful logo for us to kind of capture what we wanted to focus on and what our priorities were in this work. And so our Food Sovereignty Alliance early on came up with what you see here, our vision, mission, and aim. And I'm not going to read them to you, but just, our big goal was to restore this legacy of wellness that before colonization, our communities knew how to live well. And they passed on knowledge and skills of how to do that throughout generations. And we wanted to help restore some of those things by repairing that relationship to food and to the land. And primarily to do that through food, and food that was good for the entire person. And so we thought it was really important early to establish that so we could stay focused on what we were trying to achieve. And so the Food Sovereignty Alliance, the next few slides are kind of diving into each of our strategies to talk a little bit more about those. But our Food Sovereignty Alliance is, often in food sovereignty, I think folks talk about the rights piece of the conversation, like having the right to determine their own food system and make decisions. But I think that's only half of the conversation. It's also that we have responsibility to the earth. We have responsibility to our communities, our cultures, spiritual and traditional roles. And we have to step up and own those responsibilities. And so the Food Sovereignty Alliance is really a pathway for people to live out, access, and practice those rights as Indigenous people. And also that responsibility, that cultural responsibility that they feel like they might have. And so this is the decision-making body that is comprised and led by community members. And staff are just facilitators and kind of convene everyone monthly. And we offer support to create action plans and offer technical assistance and a little bit of coordination. And so community members, as I said, have created the vision and mission over the Sacred Roots Project. And they make all of the decisions that about what direction our program goes in. And so one of the things that they came together to determine, and they do each year, is decide what type of skills-based workshops they want to coordinate together, and we provide space to that. So we don't actually do that programming, we just help with the coordination piece and for them to come to a consensus about what they want to offer to each other. But they also help influence organizational policy, and it's a place for them to build their ownership and leadership over all of this work. And so some of those skills and knowledge-based workshops that we offer each year, we call it the Good Ancestor Learning Series. And this is a flyer here of the workshops we planned for this year. In past years, some of them have been plant and medicine walks or food outings to places like GHWIC, to different food summits, or to see farms around Detroit and the work that they're doing and learn from them. But they completely set that agenda about what skills would allow them to sustain traditional healthy lives. Then we have our community heritage garden. So one of the things, community members really wanted to expand community gardening efforts, but being in the urban environment, access to land is a really big challenge for our community. And so we, as staff, approached the Detroit Parks and Rec Department about transferring this piece of land in a public park around the corner from our agency into our stewardship, into our care. The piece of the space that we had the garden was previously started by another organization probably about 15 years ago, and they established this orchard with cherries and apples and some plums, and they had lost capacity to maintain the space. It had been fallow for a couple years and the weeds were just out of control, and so we approached the organization in the city about transferring stewardship into our care. And so it took quite a bit of time to come to some agreement with the city because there wasn't at the time a clear path to getting a permit to have that type of project in a public park. But we eventually were able to come to an agreement and get something written down. And then another challenge around this space that we've had to be really thoughtful about how to navigate is the neighborhood where it's at is very diverse. There are multiple languages that are spoken in the neighborhood. And so we've been intentional to do multilingual signage, including Anishinaabemowin. And building a sense of community and ownership over a space is really slow part of the work. And so that's obviously ongoing. Like, how do you bring in people that may not be identified as Native American or Indigenous, but this is very much their home too? How do we really bring them into the garden and let them know that although we're coming from an Indigenous perspective, that this space and this program is also for them. But yeah, so this is just really a space for those skills-based workshops and growing to happen. And Community Heritage Garden was a name, again, that the Food Sovereignty Alliance chose for that space. And then our community kitchen. We have space in our basement. There was an existing kitchen that our programs have been using for years, but a few years ago there was a really devastating flood throughout Detroit, and our kitchen was pretty much destroyed. And so I was able to not purchase equipment through GHWIC, but I was able to use my time and effort to coordinate the reviving of this space and of this kitchen. And one of our interns actually wrote a grant to a local foundation so that we could actually purchase some of the larger equipment like the stove and the refrigerator, the walk-in cooler. And then I just helped to coordinate all of these things coming together. But the primary purpose of the space is for us to do our monthly cooking classes and nutrition lessons, but also to host the preserving and processing workshops. We're also hoping eventually to help coordinate shared meal preparation, where community members could come together to pitch in a little bit of money, everyone process and make the meal together, and then they share whatever they make and take that to their individual homes. So we're in the process of getting the space licensed right now, and then after licensure, we're hoping to open up the space to food entrepreneurs, because there's so much happening in urban agriculture and the food system in Detroit, but it's really hard if you don't have the financial capital to start those food businesses to kind of get things up and going. So we want to be able to offer that space too. There's a picture, that's my coworker up there at the top holding one of our Gete Okasomen squash, and I'm down there counting the seeds that go into our seed library. And that kind of transitions into another part of our project. Early on, community members said that they wanted access to these traditional foods, but a lot of these foods didn't exist in our community. And so we started thinking, how can we create access to something that isn't actually here? So I sent a letter out to a handful of other traditional food programs that I had heard about, people that were really inspiring me at the time, and let them know what we were trying to do in Detroit. And I let them know I'm not asking for money, but if anyone has any seeds that they're willing to share with us, we'll do our best to care for them and share them throughout our community. And so letters and packages started arriving, and now we have probably close to, I'm guessing, between 30 and 40 varieties of heirloom and heritage crops in our seed library, primarily corn, beans, and squash, so the three sisters, but we have some other things in there as well. And we do seed literacy workshops, so how do you save seeds, being able to know a crop just from its seed. We incorporate that into our cooking classes and our gardening workshops, so that it's kind of infused throughout everything. It's just a natural thing that you think of as, where does this fruit or vegetable come from, and where does it start, and really getting acquainted with its life cycle. And each one of these seeds, I just want to highlight that they each come from a community and a culture of origin, and so we also are stewarding those things. Whenever we take on the stewardship of a particular variety, we make sure to learn as much as we can about the heritage, history, and identity of the community it comes from. If there's a certain way that we should care for it, and we pass that on to people that get seeds from us. And those photos are all different seeds that we take care of. And then kind of, this is more of an overview of other things that we've done through the last few years. We've been able to offer a lot of different trainings, both to our staff team and to community members. So facilitation methods has been really beneficial for our staff. Being able to hold our Food Sovereignty Alliance meetings and create those action plans. I highly, highly recommend that. I went through a permaculture design course. One of my team members went through an organic farmer training program. And so that's so we can really offer technical assistance to our community members and for the overall project and things happening in the garden and help with that like sustainability piece. Both staff and community members have gone through Serve Safe and cottage food law trainings through our local extension. We've taken community representatives from the Food Sovereignty Alliance to food sovereignty summits in Oneida community and intertribal food summits that have happened throughout the Midwest. We've both hosted and brought in teachers to do canning, dehydrating, and preserving workshops and skills trainings. We had some of our clinic staff trained we sent them to a diabetes self-management program training where they were able to bring that curriculum and program back to our clinic. We've also sent some staff to get trained in nicotine cessation, so they're able to provide better service to our clients and community members. Specific to policy, I sit on the Detroit Food Policy Council, and basically taking what community members at our Food Sovereignty Alliance are saying and amplify that on a city and regional level. And then we've also passed the kitchen standard and operating procedures of how that kitchen space is going to function, who's in charge of what type of training and orientation do people get before they use the space. And we also created healthy food options policy here at the agency, which basically outlines what type of healthy options have to be available at any agency-sponsored meeting, event, program. Things like unsweetened beverages, like whole grains, low sugar, low sodium types of foods, and making sure that those are always available to people as an option. As far as systems changes goes, the Food Sovereignty Alliance, like thinking about how are decisions made in at your site and within your programs, and really shifting that decision-making power back to the community members is a systems change. Kind of helping to facilitate or coordinate how knowledge is shared in the community through the learning series. We started a fresh prescription program in our clinic and help get that up and going. We've also strengthened a lot of partnerships with people across the city, groups across the city and across the country through Slow Food, including the Indigenous Slow Food Network, Keep Growing Detroit, which is like the leading urban agriculture organization in the area, and the Center for Regional Food Systems at Michigan State University, and a lot of other Indigenous communities that are doing food sovereignty work. And then some of the environmental things, I'm not going to go through all of these because I touched on a lot of them, but we created a healthy food guide that had the policies, some recipes, food safety information. That guide lives in our kitchen. We made some brochures that have the glycemic index of some of our traditional foods, and also promoting traditional forms of physical activity like gardening, We have a newsletter now that our program sends out with a lot of information and recipes. We also entered a partnership with Eastern Market Corporation. They run one of the oldest open air markets in the country in Detroit, and thousands and thousands of people come every weekend for that. But we have worked with them to bring a small produce stand on site a couple times a month to the busiest days of the clinic, so that our community members can access that really easily. And then we're also starting right now, we got a mini grant from a local automotive group, and we're constructing a tool shed right now where we'll have a tool lending program, specifically garden tools that, either financially not everyone can afford to own one, or they don't have the space to keep it and it doesn't make sense to everyone have these same tools. They can just check them out from us. And then a couple other things we've been working on, like I said, promoting and increasing opportunities for traditional forms of exercise like dance, gardening, walking. Our cooking classes, we started using a new curriculum this year, and it's really based in Anishinaabe culture. And our traditional lunar calendar has language lessons, traditional stories, seed study as a part of it, and our community members really are enjoying that. I've been doing the nutrition lessons and cooking classes here for several years, and especially in the winter months, it was hard. We'd had very low numbers, but numbers have been consistently high. I've never seen them this high since we've been using this curriculum, which is really exciting. And we're actually working with our SNAP-Ed funder to bring this curriculum to other Indigenous communities throughout Michigan now, who previously haven't had SNAP-Ed funding. So we're really excited that they're going to be getting culturally appropriate nutrition information and extra funding to bring that programming to their communities. Then we've also worked with them to develop a native My Plate that actually shows some of our traditional foods in different parts of the My Plate, and some kind of culturally appropriate like imagery, like our Ojibwe floral designs and stuff that really speak more to people than the kind of standard materials that they give out. So with that, I'll say miigwech, and I'll be happy to take questions. I know I ran through a lot of information.
Thank you so much. That's like incredible. You've done so much over the last 5 years. It's really, really impressive and nice to hear about.
Thank you.
Even know all that stuff.
For the most part, so the first year I have to say that it was only myself, as I say team, it was myself the first year, and then for several years it was just 2-person team. And now we're a 3-person team, and as of this week, we're bringing on someone that's a community member that's been super involved from the beginning, who has so much knowledge. We're very excited to have her part of the team now, but she's starting on Monday, so it's exciting to see her transition to a new type of leadership role with this. That makes me feel really good that we've been doing really good work, because people are truly like owning it and like stepping into new types of leadership around it.
It's wonderful. I have a question.
Yes.
For your food policy, and also the thing, there is something about the kitchen get certified or credential, or whatever the proper word is. What is that process like to have a kitchen that people can prepare and do and use that as an incubator?
Yeah, it's a very involved process. So from the city standpoint, each local city or area, your health department has its own guidelines and process you would have to go through to get the space itself licensed. And, you know, there are certain things around like how the plumbing works and the using only certain types of equipment that have like non-porous services. And so I suggest really getting familiar with your local food code. But part of it also is making sure that whatever staff are going to be helping to manage that space have the capacity to do that. So getting them trained in the manager level of ServSafe, so they know what responsibilities, what type of record keeping you have to do, but also making sure that like our program staff, even though they're not going to be using it like a restaurant kitchen, they need to have food handler training if they're going to be working in that kitchen. So it's kind of like slowly building the capacity of all parts of our organization to really be able to house that. The next piece, well, the first piece that we have to really solidify is getting the full licensure. We're in the process of, and that's, you know, an application, a small fee, and someone coming out and looking at the space, looking at your policy. A lot of the time is spent actually getting the space put together the way that it's supposed to. I suggest if someone's interested in doing that, trying to find a mentor in your area, someone that's gone through that process or is very familiar with licensed kitchens, and asking them to help you like walk through your plan and how you're envisioning the space to be utilized. That is a very involved, detailed process. But yeah, definitely start there and just kind of start slowly building out your capacity depending on how you want to use it. And we've also been working with the Public Health Law Center out of the Twin Cities, is helped us write up a draft agreement that if someone was renting the space out, what should be included in that. And we're finally some of those details, but they're an awesome resource to reach out to about those type of things.
Are they serving tribes nationally or?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So on your website, are we able to find those policies and some of those sample documents, or no, not yet?
We don't have them on the website. We have a lot of information on there, but I can bring my contact back up, and I'm happy to share those.
That would be wonderful, because we are just in the process of putting a commercial kitchen together. So it's probably good to, because it hasn't been put in yet, time to make sure it's put together right, so we don't have to retrofit.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
I have another question kind of on the kitchen thing. So once you do get that certified, you were talking about using that as a resource for other people that are interested in kind of getting food projects off the ground. Mm-hmm. So would you be offering that as a free resource, or would they be renting it and that would kind of be like some income generation for the organization?
Yes, the second there, what you said. So it would be a very low fee, and there's actually network of incubator kitchens around the city, and so we will most likely tap into them, and all the kitchens it's a very small fee per hour, so that we are able to get some unrestricted funds and help sustain staff or programming with that.
We have thank you. We have a question in the chat here. It says, do you keep your water safe, or how do you keep your water safe, and do you use water tanks from rain?
Yeah, so we typically use, the previous, I guess the people that started that garden space, actually, it was a very large nonprofit, and so they put a irrigation line into the park, which is a huge advantage for us, but we do have to pay for our own water through that. We do not in that space have any rain catchment system, just because security of that, not being able to make sure that no one puts anything in the water. So we don't do that any in that space, but it hasn't been, at least in Michigan, we don't have much of an issue usually with rainfall and drought. So dry farming is kind of or gardening is more of an option for us. And then we use just kind of hose hookup at our small seed saving garden in front of the agency. Did I answer both questions there?
Yes, thank you. I have a question. What is a butagan making?
Oh, botagan. It's kind of like a mortar and pestle, but it's made out of a log, and it's burned out in the center to make kind of a basin. And then it's traditionally used for grinding things like corn or other grains to make more of like a flour. And you use a timer there. You also use another smaller log kind of as the pounding mechanism.
Thank you.
Another question in the chat is, do you plant any ceremony medicine plants?
We do. So we have sema or tobacco, sweetgrass, cedar, and sage in our small seed saving garden. And we work with our youth program. They actually care for those and get a lot of teachings around how to properly care for them. We bring in people from a lot of different backgrounds to give different teachings from different tribal perspectives, because we have, I think, over 200 nations represented in our service population. And so we try to bring in as many different perspectives and teachings as we can. But yes, we do grow the 4 sacred medicines for this region. And then we also have a small, call it medicine garden within the seed saving garden. And it's kind of combination medicine and butterfly garden where we grow some other medicines as well.
Thank you. There was also a follow-up question there was, how can we get some of the sweetgrass?
The best way to start sweetgrass, in my experience, has been with plugs. So getting little transplants, and it really likes wet soil, and it can be a little hard to get started. It doesn't like to be crowded by weeds or anything, so you have to really, when it's getting started and established, you have to make sure that its root system doesn't get crowded out. And the ones that we have were gifted to us by a community member. I'm not sure where you could get them otherwise. I'm not sure how to mail any. I could try to figure that out though.
Sure, that would be great. Okay, do we have any other questions? Feel free to type them into the chat box.
And I'm going to go ahead and, if anyone's thinking of questions, I'm going to launch the poll and also just run and grab my laptop charger because my laptop's about to die. So you can take the poll, and then if there's any other questions that come up while that happens, then you feel free to answer those, and I'll be right back.
Shiloh, I'm going to just share your email there that was at the end of the presentation into the chat box in case people wanted to jot it down.
And it looks like there was a question about list of resources for native seeds.
Yeah, I can be a little bit of a resource. We don't have a huge library or supply to share, but we would be happy to share what we are able to with other communities. There in California,